August 6, 2023, Sydney, Australia. The United States women's national team is tied 0-0 with Sweden after 120 minutes of football. No goals, no resolution. It goes to penalties. Megan Rapinoe steps up. She has scored in pressure moments for over a decade. She helped win the 2019 World Cup on this same stage of competition. The ball leaves her foot, rises, and clears the crossbar by several feet. Wide, high, gone. "That's like a sick joke," she would say afterward, per Fox Sports. She didn't know it then, but that was her last kick as a professional soccer player. Sweden won the shootout 5-4. Sophia Smith missed. Kelly O'Hara's attempt hit the post. The United States, four-time World Cup champions, was eliminated in the round of 16. The earliest exit in program history. The stadium cameras caught the faces. Rapinoe sitting on the turf. Morgan staring at nothing. A team that had defined American soccer for a generation. Suddenly done. What happened in the months that followed, and what the Netflix documentary Under Pressure documented in the months before, tells a story that goes far deeper than one penalty shootout. If you want to understand what really happened to this team, stay with me. Before I get into it, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. I cover the behind-the-scenes stories in women's sports that the mainstream media buries. New video every week. Now let's get into it. By 2023, the United States women's national team had built one of the most dominant legacies in sports history. 4 World Cup titles, 4 Olympic gold medals, a program that had produced the most recognizable names in women's soccer, Mia Hamm, Abby Wambach, and then the generation of Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, who won in 2019 and turned women's soccer into must-watch television. They weren't just winners. They were icons. They negotiated a landmark equal pay settlement with U.S. Soccer in 2022. They were the program every other national team measured itself against. The 2023 tournament in Australia and New Zealand was supposed to be the next chapter. Vlatko Andonovski had been the head coach since 2019. He had shepherded the team through a chaotic pandemic period, an Olympics where they won bronze in Tokyo, a result that disappointed a fan base accustomed to gold, and a qualification cycle that positioned them as favorites going into the World Cup. The United States entered the tournament as one of the top seeds. The expectation wasn't just to win. It was to look inevitable doing it. That was the standard. It had always been the standard. But the roster that boarded the plane to Australia was not the frictionless machine that the 2019 team had been. It was something more complicated, a team in transition, whether or not anyone in the Federation was willing to say it out loud. A team that had never fully reckoned with what it meant to be the most successful women's soccer program in history, while also being a program that desperately needed to evolve. On one side, the veterans. Rapinoe and Morgan had both been central to the 2019 championship. They were co-captains. They were the brand. They had helped make women's soccer commercially visible in the United States in a way it had never been before. They had earned their place a dozen times over. On the other side, a generation of players in their early 20s who had grown up watching Rapinoe and Morgan win, and who now needed to surpass them. Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith, players who had been shaped by an entirely different era, social media, TikTok, a Gen Z culture that processed competition and communication in ways the veterans had never navigated. As documented in the Netflix series Under Pressure, which released in December 2023 and provided the most direct window into the team's atmosphere, the competition for roster spots was relentless and unforgiving. Lynn Williams put it plainly in the documentary, "Every single day, you have somebody who is knocking on your door, waiting for you to mess up, waiting for you to get injured, waiting for you to fail." That is not a quote describing enemies. It is a quote describing the structural reality of playing for the most scrutinized women's soccer program on the planet. The tension was real, and it was built into the system. In Australia, the cracks that had been forming came into full view. The team's group stage performance was uneven. they scraped through. Alex Morgan, co-captain, one of the most famous women in American sports, started all 4 of the team's tournament games. She scored 0 goals, 1 assist. For a player of her caliber in a World Cup, that was a story in itself. And then came Sweden, the penalty shootout that ended everything. 3 players missed. Rapinoe's attempt went high and wide. Sophia Smith's attempt was saved. Kelly O'Hara's hit the post. Sweden converted their 5 penalties flawlessly. Final score, 5-4. The United States was out. Per Fox Sports, Rapinoe's reaction afterward, "That's like a sick joke," captured something about the surreal weight of the moment. She had played 24 years of competitive soccer. She had been at the center of American women's soccer for more than a decade, and it ended like this, on a miss, in a round of 16. 8 days later, on August 16, 2023, Vlatko Andonovski resigned as head coach, per the Washington Post and Fox Sports. The departure was swift, but the story that emerged in its aftermath was slower moving and more damaging. One detail became emblematic of the coaching disconnect during his tenure. A player named Sanchez had appeared in all 8 of the USWNT's games in 2023 leading up to the World Cup. She had played her way into the picture, and then in the tournament itself, she received 0 playing time. The roster decisions went unexplained. The communication breakdown was never publicly addressed. That kind of gap between what a player is told in training and what actually happens on the pitch doesn't make headlines the way a miss in a penalty shootout does. But it shapes the internal atmosphere of a team. A coach who cannot communicate his expectations creates a locker room full of players who cannot trust what they are being told. As Alex Morgan herself described in the Under Pressure documentary, the tactical demands of the game had evolved. "You can't do that now, because the game has evolved so much. We still have to adjust our game a little bit defensively and on the attack every game." That adjustment, tactical and cultural, was what the team needed someone to facilitate. It wasn't happening. The generational fault line that the documentary captured wasn't a feud. It was a structural gap. Veterans who had won everything found themselves sharing training sessions with players young enough to be their daughters. The ways they competed, the ways they communicated, the ways they processed pressure, these were different in documented ways. And nobody in the coaching staff managed those differences effectively enough to keep the program moving forward. The Federation moved quickly. On November 14, 2023, Emma Hayes was announced as the new head coach of the United States women's national team, per Fox Sports. Hayes was at the time the most decorated coach in the history of the Women's Super League in England, having won multiple league titles with Chelsea. She was blunt, demanding, and known for a clarity of expectation that was the direct opposite of the ambiguity that had defined Andonovski's final months. She officially took the reins in May 2024, and she made hard decisions immediately. Alex Morgan, the co-captain, the face of the program, the player who had represented the USWNT for over a decade, did not make the 2024 Olympic roster. Hayes had decided the future of the team looked different from its past. She built around Trinity Rodman and Sophia Smith, the players who had been knocking on the door. She built around clarity of role, accountability, and a squad that knew exactly what was expected of it. The team went to Paris, and they won gold. The same Sophia Smith who had missed a penalty in the 2023 World Cup came back and stood on the Olympic podium. Trinity Rodman, who had watched veterans occupy space she was ready to fill, was central to the program's new identity. What changed wasn't the talent level. The talent had always been there. What changed was a coaching philosophy built around clear communication and a willingness to make decisions based on where the program was going, not where it had been. In the end, the story of 2023 is not about enemies. The Netflix documentary didn't show a team tearing itself apart. It showed a team under extreme pressure, the kind of pressure that comes from playing for the most successful women's soccer program in history, where winning is the only acceptable outcome and every player knows someone is waiting to take her place. What the documentary showed, and what the results confirmed, is that pressure without direction becomes chaos. Rapinoe and Morgan gave this program more than a decade of excellence. What they could not give it was a future. That had to come from somewhere else. Rapinoe retired on that penalty kick in Sydney, whether she knew it at the time or not. Morgan was eventually cut from the program she had helped build. Rodman and Smith won gold a year later. The USWNT didn't break. It rebuilt, fast, under a coach who understood that legacy is not enough to sustain a program. Every cycle has to be built again. The 2023 collapse wasn't the end of American women's soccer. It was the moment the next chapter finally had to begin. If this story made you think differently about what it takes to rebuild a dynasty, click on the video on your screen right now. I have more stories like this, the behind-the-scenes moments in women's sports that the headlines barely touched. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.